Happy Friday. I do have a hard stop at in 1 hour, unfortunately.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Sounds good. Just because we think things are super exciting doesn't necessarily mean everybody else wants to carry on that far. So I was having a tough time deciding. I've got my hydrogen t-shirt on. I was going to wear my Marty Mitochondria t-shirt, but it's kind of distracting. So he's such an important character that, you kind of want to feature him full time.
Why?
So.
How did you get into like the cartooning aspect of this? Just to make it more accessible, or?
Yeah, so that's a long story. And this is about you. This is your podcast, but basically, I discovered I met Laszlo Boros about 7 years ago and had my mind blown. And I got introduced into what Deuterium is, and that led me down a path of investigation. And I think that all people who start to dig into biology and health, and I have my own, of course, personal health story that brought me to the table in the first place, is that I think that ultimately people who are in the know of what health really is will all come to the same conclusions, even though some of the stuff that you talk about may seem very wacky to people. It certainly doesn't to me. I was very excited to find you and to see you because I'm a little disappointed in life. I went to the Metabolic Health Conference in Santa Barbara recently, and basically that's the resistance. These are the doctors who are open to what health really looks like. And I had been to that conference before, and it had been good. When it was in Los Angeles, it was pretty good, but there's nobody there to save us, just so you know. I met all of the doctors there, and nobody's coming in on a white horse. I wore my mitochondria t-shirt. It was kind of missed at that meeting. And if you can wear a mitochondria t-shirt anywhere, it should have been there. So I was excited to see a young, fresh face that was able to communicate this weird information really well. I think you do a great job. And enough about me. I want to talk about you. I want to know how you got into this. Tell us about yourself and the path that led you to being Carrie B Wellness, and the person that you are presenting that we see out there.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, like you said, a journey. We all have a journey, and I think this really started off in my undergrad, right? Because I did, pre-med in biology in undergrad, and I love science, right? I love this stuff. Now, looking back on it, I learned probably some really incomplete mechanisms and wrong pathways and things, but I loved it, right? And I loved science and the intricacies. And I remembered then having an existential crisis my senior year. I went and I spoke with my volleyball coach, and I was like, I don't want to do what I'm supposed to do. Like what I'm supposed to do when you go to like a really science-minded undergrad is I was supposed to go into one of these PhD programs, right? That I had available, or one of these med schools that I had available. And my professors their jaws dropped. And I was like, well, I'm going to go to massage therapy school. And they were just like, what in the world is like, and I had that same conversation with my parents. My volleyball coach was super supportive. She's all about like, following your path. My parents were super supportive too, but they were just kind of like, again, taken aback. It's like, okay, well, go ahead, right? Go ahead and go to massage therapy school, but get a job, put yourself through that. And the job that I convinced myself to do was a personal trainer. I was an athlete my whole life. It's like, okay, I know this stuff, right? So I became a certified personal trainer, Pilates instructor, like go back to the early 2000s, Tae Bo and like all the traditional exercise, step aerobics, all the traditional exercise back then. Yeah. I taught it, right? I opened up a personal training studio. I went through massage therapy school. And massage therapy school opened me up to a different way of thinking about the body, right? But I had a very, very Western education. And now this is a very Eastern view of energy flow and meridians and all that stuff and our connective tissue. And I loved it. And so I started to say, okay, well, what is foundational to health, right? I originally thought that because I was an athlete, my exercise is the end all be all. And then I was like, well, obviously there's this energy flow. So we have to take care of our connective tissue, our bodies. Fast forward to when I got my worst health crisis, which was, this diagnosis, right, from a naturopath, because Western medicine thought there was nothing wrong with me. I think we've all kind of gone down that pathway.
Right.
That I went to a naturopath and she said, well, you've got adrenal fatigue and you've got, gluten intolerance and you've got, insomnia, all these things. And that was after my first child was born. And like any good nerd, I was like, well, I got to figure this out. Right. And so I took it to what I thought was foundational at the time, which was nutrition. So I
Sure.
went and I got a master's degree in clinical nutrition, thinking that that would be the end all be all. And in the meantime, I'm working with clients and I'm trying to optimize their health. And, everyone wanted to lose weight, have better energy, better sleep. And it was like, well, exercise wasn't working to the extent that I thought it
Yeah.
would.
Yeah.
Nutrition was doing a little bit more, but not fully to the extent that I wanted it to. And that
Right.
ultimately led me to the work of Jack Cruz. And, when I read some of his blogs, I was like, this is interesting.
Hmm.
I know. It was
Hmm.
like, wait a second. And so then obviously, I mean, if anyone knows Jack Cruz's work, it's it's full of science, right? Like, and information and interconnections. And my nerd
Yeah.
brain was just like, I want to understand this because I think there's something to it. And I started applying one of the most basic aspects, and that was the light. And I noticed such a foundational shift. That's how I really got into quantum biology. I said, wait, there's something to understanding the light in my environment and how it impacts me. And then I just dove down that rabbit hole and I've been there ever since.
So, okay, well, first of all, you look too young to know about Taibo and step aerobics, but that's a different discussion. What was your undergraduate degree in? Is it bio or
It was just a general biology. It was with an
okay.
emphasis in microbiology, actually. So that was where I was heading towards. And,
Right.
you
Well,
know,
you have to understand that that's a really good foundation because to understand Jack Cruz's work, I think he's genius, one of the smartest people on the planet. He doesn't want to make it easy for you. He doesn't want to lay it out too simply he really wants you to do the work. And it's the black swan theory. This will lead me back to what I'm doing. I'm the white swan. Jack Cruz wants a narrow group of people to really get into this stuff. I want to share this basic information globally. And that's where I got into cartoons and music and all that, because as a child, I was one of those very sick kids. And I don't think it's right to expect people who don't have a science background to really whittle this down to what it is. So I really want to be able to expose this side of science, which is real science, compared to traditional medicine. Traditional medicine, has failed us severely. And I'm part of that paradigm. So, all right. So, what is a quantum biologist? And if you introduce yourself, give the people who haven't really put their mind around this, what is quantum biology and how does it relate to the modern world? And what would you introduce yourself as a quantum? Because that's what, if I introduce you at the Metabolic Health Summit to some of the doctors who were just thinking about a ketogenic diet for the first time, I would say, this is Carrie, she's a quantum biologist. But what does that mean?
it's a great question. I call myself a quantum clinician and educator, and I talk about how the body operates at the quantum level. So we know biology, right? It's like we understand that we are biological beings, and so we operate on biology. And I have to take people a step further because we have to recognize that at the most fundamental level, I'm a bunch of tissues made up of a bunch of cells that contain a bunch of proteins and molecules, and that those proteins and molecules are made up of atoms. And then people start to send their brain back to like high school chemistry, and that those atoms are made up of electrons, protons, neutrons, and also interact with photons. And that's where I start to tell people that what I've learned and what I teach is how to optimize those subatomic particles, how to understand our body at that level, because when we do, we can truly optimize foundational, right? The foundation of our health, as opposed to where, I was taught in, undergrad where it's like biochemistry is the foundation of the body, or even, in nutrition school, you talk about like helping the body with supplements. That's still a chemical intervention. What I talk about is an intervention that influences subatomic particles. And that is why quantum biology has been so helpful for me in my health, so helpful for my clients. And then, I also teach these certification programs and things, and other clinicians and doctors have found it also to be extremely simple yet extremely beneficial.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I started to think about when I got into this, thought about chemistry. One of my comments is that as you keep shrinking down smaller and smaller, chemistry becomes electricity. Chemistry, and once you start to get down into these tiny little pieces of reality that we're made of, everything starts to change and the rules really don't apply anymore. So, most of the people who would be watching my podcast know the basics about deuterium. I've spent a lot of time on that subject. But it gets really confusing to people when you start to say electrons, protons, and neutrons. And, I like to think of it as like, look, there's positivity and negativity, and there's neutrality. That's kind of it, guys. That's all that we have. All right. Okay, well, that sounds interesting. I have a bunch of questions that I want to ask you. When I interview somebody, I usually have seen their podcast and I really know the answers I want to pull from them. With you, I got a bunch of really different questions and, we can keep them sort of brief. I want to go through a list of topics and just get your feedback on it. And I want to start with sun exposure. All right. So one of the things that you focus on is getting sun exposure at different times during the day. That's something that I do at work. Right now I'm in Los Angeles and it's very sunny here, except I live at the beach. And if you're down here, we have to play some beach volleyball. I don't know if you play, but I play beach volleyball. That's where I spend my time. All right, cool. So I live right at the beach and it's often overcast. So when I wake up in the morning, it may be sunny a mile inland, but here it's foggy. Do I still have the same benefit to going outside early in the morning without being able to see the sun?
Yeah, you absolutely do, right? You absolutely do. So it's a misnomer that when it's a cloudy day or a foggy day, that there's none of the sun's frequencies getting to us. That would be called darkness, right? So if ever you go outside and it's dark out, you're not going to get the sun's light, the sun's code. But if it's any other sky, cloudy, foggy, snowy, rainy, you name it, you're going to get all of the colors coming from the sun still. So yes, go outside first thing in the morning. I'm big on our body interacting with light because like you said, when we bring it down to electricity and energy flow and things, we are beings that basically, just like plants, interact with light as the foundation for setting our circadian rhythm, for changing gene expression, for even doing things like creating free electrons inside of us. When we can create free electrons inside of us, that's what we operate on. And you with your mitochondria, talk about mitochondria. What do mitochondria take in? They basically need electrons, right? Electrons and oxygen, and that is ultimately what they need to create water inside of our cells. So I feel like if we can recognize that sunlight is a way that we basically use the light's frequencies and how it changes throughout the day from sunrise to solar noon and then back through sunset, we use the light frequencies as a code to tell our body what to do. And then we also then can use certain frequencies, namely ultraviolet and infrared, to support that negative charge inside of our bodies, which is what we operate on, right? We're negative beings, which is not necessarily to talk about like our personalities, but at that electricity level, we need more electrons than protons. Bottom line. And so if we can use the sunlight to do that as one of the ways that we can do that, then that's a great free source to be able to optimize that function.
Right. I think people think that plants and animals are completely different. They're not thinking that the idea that plants is maybe less evolved in certain ways, and that Mother Nature would never get rid of anything that was giving us free energy. I think humans are the ultimate opportunistic omnivores, and we'll literally take an energy from anywhere we can get it. So, all right. Yeah. And what about you want to do sun gazing? We know don't look directly into the sun, but I live at the bottom where there's a hill blocking the sun. So the sun won't break through until a little later in the day. Does that mean I'm missing those early colors and early photons that I want?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Right. That's another misnomer, but it's a great question because the sun the blend of sunlight that's there at any given time of day, you'll have access to it whether you're sitting in the shade, whether the sun is too low for you to actually see the sun. So all you have to do is be outside. Light acts in this beautiful way, right? Light acts as both a particle and a wave. So we have to think of light a lot like water, that it fills the space. So the light will get to us even if we can't directly see it. It's a fascinating thing. I tell people this very simple explanation, right? If I took a flashlight with a very powerful beam into a completely dark room, I can illuminate what I was looking for. Maybe I was looking for, an outlet or something, right? I can illuminate a direct object, but I can also then hold the beam at that object and look around the room, and the room will also be lit up. It's not going to be pitch black everywhere else. And that's because the light is also acting like a wave and filling that space, even though it's not directly in the line of the beam of the flashlight. Sun is the same thing. Do we have a bit more intensity when we're directly in it? Yes, we do. But that doesn't mean we don't get a benefit from it and get all of the colors and all the code from it when we're even just in the ambient environment and not directly in the line of the sun.
And this is a question still based on that, and you may not have the full answer, but so for people who try to get outside for the morning sunlight, if they have to limit when they can go out, would it be smarter for them to pick those clear days versus the cloudy days? Is it that much more advantageous? Is it quantifiable? Is it like a clear day? So here, again, one day I wake up, it's perfectly clear, not a cloud in the sky, and most days it's fogged over. So if I have a limited amount of morning, should I focus on those mornings that are clear? Is that much better, or
No.
it's a tough question, right?
Yeah, no, it's not. Actually, you got to get consistency, right? So the rhythms in our body that rely on the light, they just need a regular input. And so I always tell my clients to have it being consistently good with your habits is better than occasionally perfect. So let's say it's clear every 10 days and you spend 30 minutes outside every 10 days. That's nowhere near as good as 3 minutes every cloudy morning, because it's that consistent input that we need in order to sync our rhythms, in order to charge our water battery. I mean, things that we can go into quantumly, but we need that consistency. It's a non-linear thing. When you're dealing with the quantum scale, the quantum aspect, the quantum health, it's non-linear, which means you just need a small stimulus to create this massive cascade throughout the body. We're really used to linear things, right? We're very used to, okay, I want to get stronger. So today I'm going to do 3 push-ups. Tomorrow I have to do 4. The next day I have to do 5. You can't just do 3 push-ups the rest of your life and think that you're going to build strength, but you can do 3 minutes of sunrise every single day and get all of the quantum cascades you need to take place, from setting your circadian rhythm to optimizing hormone production, you name it. It can happen just with the small stimulus.
This is a non-hormesis type of effect, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Okay, fantastic. Now, the last question in this category is: should I have my clothes off? Is that better if I have the opportunity, within reason, what's legal in your community? Is it better to have my skin exposed than to just be like wearing a long sleeve shirt and go outside and my face and eyes are exposed?
Yeah, I mean, it is better, but I would always say that light is the most potent surface we have to interact with light is our eyes. So the best thing you can do is have naked eyes outside. If you can also have like a naked torso or naked legs, right, that's only going to enhance the benefit. But you want to make sure your eyes are what is really getting the code. That's all you need if that's all you can do.
Right, great. Well, I have this incredible opportunity. The ocean is right there.
Beautiful.
So when I go out in the morning, people look at me like I'm nuts because it's chilly. I'm doing cold therapy. I've got just my shorts on, and early in the morning, people are walking with scarves and sunglasses and hats, and I'm walking along with my feet in the water. So let's talk about the electron flow that we're getting from the Schumann resonance of the Earth. Now I'm in salt water. You are in the middle of America. I'm assuming you've got lakes and whatever. What do you think the difference is between grounding on wet, damp grass in the summer or on the shore of a lake versus the ocean? Is there a major difference in the electron flow that you're getting?
I mean, a wet surface will always be a more conductive surface, right? That's just basic electricity. We know that if there's a lightning storm, it's raining outside and there's lightning, don't be in the water, right? You can be under your porch where it's dry, but don't be in the water. So that, I mean, there's just that basic idea. But really, there's not a heck of a huge difference for electron flow, I would say, between those surfaces. Negative ions, you might be able to convince me that there's definitely more of a negative ion effect of the air at something like a saltwater location. But otherwise, just simply touching our skin to the bare earth, we're semiconductors of electrons. Not woo, not controversial. It's like we know that our connective tissue is actually a semiconductor. What is crazy that I was never taught as a kid or I don't know if any of us were ever taught this very, very much, is that the Earth's surface is full of electrons. Lightning discharges, right, in areas that are electron depleted, essentially to replete the electrons. And then when the sun is out, you have this photoelectric effect. The sun's beams actually kick the electrons out of the earth. And so we have a beautiful opportunity. If we go back to this idea that I am full of negative charge, if I'm full of this negative subatomic information, these electrons, then I got to do everything I can to try to gather these electrons, to try to soak them up. And so that just basically at any time possible that I can touch any bare skin to anything that we would call earth, right? Grass, sand, dirt, right? I'm going to soak up the electrons into my body. And those electrons then have the ability to flow based on my tissue networks, my water networks. They can basically flow anywhere they're needed to reestablish negative charge.
That sounds great. So I have something called radiation rules in my stuff, and one of my rules is if when I go to play volleyball, I immediately go down, put my feet in the water, because the dry sand is not going to be conductive. That's again, so when I play volleyball, this is this happened to me yesterday. I was playing, we usually play in the afternoons, especially, Thursday, Friday, end of the week. A guy came down I'd never met before. He doesn't know that I'm nuts about sunscreen, which we're going to talk about in a second. Came down, it was already 6 o'clock. Now it's the height of summer here and the sun was still hot, but he came down and dropped everything, grabbed his sunscreen. And of course he had clear spray sunscreen. And I'm already like, no, don't do it. And I said to him, I didn't know him, but I thought, I don't care. And I said, you don't need to put sunscreen on. It's 6 p.m. This is just infrared radiation. There's no UV radiation. You don't need to protect yourself. This is actually healthy sunlight. And he looked at me and just started spraying himself. He clearly didn't care. So radiation rules, my rules are, if you go to the beach and you're going to be there, go put your feet in the water. I do it at the beginning before I play, and I do it at the end after I play, just to get a recharge. And I think that when I got into grounding, I thought, this is nuts. People are crazy. This is such stupid hippie stuff. And then I thought, well, if your heart stopped and somebody used some electrodes, some paddles to get your heart started, is it really so crazy to believe that this is electricity affects you? And then there's the rouleau effect. I can't find enough scientific support to show that the minute you step onto conductive ground, that your red blood cells just separate, which is really fantastic considering that most of my patients who are a little older are on blood thinners. Mm-hmm. And, that's why we talked about sulfur. I emailed you saying, this is a major component of our health. Okay, anyway, so I don't want to get off topic here. So now, last question for you is, so on this category, so I avoid sunscreen, but I already damaged my face from wearing it and eating the wrong foods and being in the sun. I grew up in central Canada, got burnt a million times. So I'm kind of done. It's hard for me to advocate for sun exposure. You've got a great complexion. You look wonderful. When I say things, people look at me and they're like, oh, well, look at you. Your face looks, I'm an older gentleman, so I don't really care. But you have kids. What sunscreen do you use for your kids? Do you use it? How much do you have to fight with daycare or school to say, don't put this sunscreen on my kid? Or give us your 60-second pitch on what you think about sunscreen.
We don't use sunscreen as a family. And I have very fair skin, right? And I used to burn horribly when I was a kid. And, then my mom they would slather sunscreen on me, and I would still oftentimes burn horribly as a kid. And so what I tell people now, and this has proven true time and time again with my kids at the beach, family members who take this advice, clients who take this advice, is we have built-in endogenous mechanisms to give us not only our own sun protection, but also signals when we have had enough sun exposure. And if we listen to those cues, we're fine. And so what that cue is, well, I'm in Michigan, right? 42nd latitude. I need to be getting regular sun exposure from basically March onward. And if I do that, I'm getting the signal that the sun is starting to intensify. And when my eyes perceive it, they start to build an endogenous layer of sunscreen called urocanic acid. And so they also then can lay down some melanin, right? There's that tanning effect, which is also an SPF protectant. And then lastly, I also get what's called an erythema response, which is not a sunburn, right? That's what I think people think is that initial pinkening of the skin is simply my blood vessels dilating and being like, okay, we've sunned ourselves. We release a little histamine to pinken the skin to show that you've made enough vitamin D, enough nitric oxide, we've gotten enough ultraviolet, like you name it. At that point, if I experience that, I put on a long sleeve shirt, cotton shirt, and a hat, and I get myself out of the sun. But and I get myself out of the direct sun. However, you're exactly right. If we're still at the beach at 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, that protective clothing comes off. I don't even want to call it protective, but that clothing comes off because if I expose my skin to that infrared rich light, that's actually going to soothe any potential little bit of extra radiation that I've gotten, and it completely clears it. So I don't then go to sleep with a sunburn. I don't wake up with a sunburn. I just have a tan. I just get this kind of golden skin tone, and it's beautiful. We do it time and again. What messes this up? Sunglasses. When you block the signal about what light so all of a sudden if this is what needs to see what light frequencies are out there, and I block the signal that ultraviolet is there, my skin's not going to build up the endogenous coating, this SPF. My skin's not going to do a nice erythema response to tell me, okay, you've had enough. It's going to go straight to excessive, burning, because it's not going to build up those mechanisms. And so that's a huge issue, right? It's not that ultraviolet light is bad. It's that we don't build it up in our environment, right? The typical office worker here doesn't do what I'm talking about. Then they go to the beach on vacation for a week, spray themselves with sunscreen, put sunglasses on, and then they burn. And it's just like, if you actually go by nature's laws, you'll do it without any harm to your body.
Well, so what you just explained was genius and elegant. The biggest issue that we always have is people say, "But I don't want to get cancer. My uncle had melanoma, so I'm probably going to get it." And it's so frustrating for me because I have to have these catchphrases like, "The sun doesn't cause cancer. Inappropriate sun exposure can lead to cancer," and that's really the truth. But I'm assuming that the people who actually come to you are going to be open to that. But the biggest argument I usually tell people is to say that, so if melanoma was caused by too much sun, we'd have it on our heads, on our nose, on the top of our ears. We'd see it everywhere. We don't see that. That's, and I said melanoma is caused by too little sun, and then they tune me out. They don't want to hear when I sing eat red meat. It all goes downhill. All right. They just like, just fix my teeth, please. All right. So that this leading us into nighttime and the absence of light. So I want to talk about darkness, and I want to talk about melatonin. One of my missions, so I just finished my song for melatonin, and that's one of my characters. The song is called Darkness Must Fall. And it's a sort of more melancholy song. Most of my stuff is very up energy, but basically this is a story about how melatonin is very somber because basically people are cutting him out of their lives. And this is really tragic. Now, new information that everyone in my community is excited about is that sun exposure builds melatonin in the mitochondria. Who'd have thought? Okay, like you might need some melatonin in your mitochondria. All right.
Right.
So tell us, the other thing is that I block my blue light. I have a timer set for 8:30 every day. My blue blockers come out. But what I want you to talk about that with regard to also, so I'm still watching TV sometimes. I'm still on my computer or my phone. I've got my blue blockers on. Should I be worried about what that blue light's doing to my face and the rest of my body? Should I be wearing a face shield that's red? Would that be smarter? I thought about that, why don't I have a visor so I can wear long sleeve clothing and cover my whole face? The blue blockers, the eyes are obviously the most important, but basically give us your sort of lowdown. And I sort of want to know, well, why does melatonin get destroyed from blue light and how does that happen?
Yeah, it's a great questions, great things to talk about here. Well, first off, I think people need to recognize, and I'm sure you talk about this, that melatonin is like a massive antioxidant system in the body. We just assume that it puts us to sleep. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. And we make it in a couple of places. So one place that we make it really does help to put us to sleep. That's in our pineal gland, right? And we make it in our pineal gland in response to sensing darkness. We also make it all day long, as you alluded to, like how this is like some big news research, that we make it subcellularly, like we make it inside of our cells, and we make that in response to infrared light. Again, why we need light, right? Why we need that light touching our skin. And window glass blocks the majority of infrared. Everything wants to be energy efficient. We don't have infrared in our bulbs anymore. We don't have infrared in our lights or in our windows anymore coming through. So we're missing this infrared. And why does that matter? Well, as we know, that what melatonin then does inside of our cells is it optimizes electron flow through the mitochondria. The ability of electrons to become water and ATP, which is a huge, what we basically need. It's the currencies that we need to thrive. The ability of electrons to do that depends on this little process called the electron transport chain. And that electron transport chain has a certain length it needs to be. It needs to be just the perfect length for these electrons to tunnel from step to step to step. If we get these that spread out, we lose electrons. Lost electrons are inflammation, reactive oxygen species. They don't become water. They don't become ATP, right? It's just this horrible cascading effect. So we want this, and we can make it, and we can optimize it from that infrared exposure onto our skin, right? We soak that in deep. It makes cellular melatonin. And so we can make it in two places, and it does a whole bunch of stuff besides just puts us to sleep. But the issue with blue light then becomes the fact that when the sun sets, there is no significant blue light intensity coming from my environment. It wouldn't be coming from the sun. It wouldn't be coming from anything but potentially the moon. And that is nominal compared to what we're experiencing these days. So my brain senses darkness. If I was camping, right, my brain senses darkness. I'm starting to produce a ton of that pineal melatonin that's going to put me to sleep, and it's going to do a whole bunch of repair for me when I am asleep. And blue light ruins it, because melatonin and has kind of like a seesaw effect with a hormone called cortisol. Cortisol is what, we get a rise of in the morning. We're supposed to get a rise of melatonin at night. And when all of a sudden my eyes and also my skin perceive blue light after the sun has set, my brain goes, it's the wrong time of day. Tank the melatonin, suppress the melatonin, elevate that cortisol. It's the start of the day again. And you get this cortisol surge, which can lead to someone feeling like a second wind. A lot of my clients with fatigue say, but I get my second wind at 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night. And it's like, well, I can tell you exactly why that happens. And so that's what blue light does. It basically signals to our brain it's the middle of the day. It destroys it can destroy certain photoreceptors too. We can go into details on that. And it suppresses melatonin so that we can't get to sleep, and we don't take advantage of all the repair that can happen when we need that melatonin high at night.
Right. Okay. I love that answer. So then what do you think about a face shield? So definitely more significant in the eyes, but is there an effect of blue light on the skin after dark, do you think?
Well, our skin is like a second eye for us. It has the same light receptors as our eyes, but like you said, not as potent. I have found just in my clinical experience that only a handful of the thousands of people that I've interacted with and worked with really need to be protective of their skin. Oftentimes it's enough for them to simply wear the orange or the red tone blue blockers, and that's good. But yeah, there are some people who are exquisitely sensitive in their skin. And so, I would say if someone is doing everything they can to block the blue light, like you're talking about, long sleeve shirts, glasses, and you still feel like you're not getting to sleep at a circadian appropriate time, then you might want to say, okay, what can I do to mitigate, any skin exposure, to see if that helps.
People are funny because they're like, oh, I'm a night owl. This is my chronotype. And I'm like, no, Mother Nature made one model that we all go to sleep at night, except if you're nocturnal, it's a whole different story. But, oh no, I don't need a lot of sleep. So one of my focuses is sleep apnea, and that's part of this whole syndrome. And, as a dentist, I make sleep apnea devices, which is just one aspect of how to treat sleep apnea. The circadian issues, the light issues, no, this is not on anyone's radar. And my book's called The Modern Epidemic. It's literally the disease of modern living. And it's because humans become disconnected from their natural habitat. That it's as simple as that.
Yep.
And okay, so at your home, I'm assuming that when the sun goes down, all you have is red light everywhere, keep it dim.
It's a little bit, yeah. I did do a period of time where it was only red light, and I have actually, some people love that. I've actually found that monocolor, it was actually too jarring for us. It's me, my husband, three kids, right? And so we switched to the really tiny and dim Edison style incandescent bulbs. So very, very low intensity light, but really mimics a gentle campfire. And that was, and like those, we have like two of them, right, that we can turn on if we need it. So we all naturally have a very dim house. We don't turn a bunch of lights on. And when we do, it's just a couple of those incandescent Edison style bulbs. And that's been a beautiful thing. It also had the neighbors also kind of stopped questioning about our crazy red house. Right?
Well, people probably go by here and go, that's that red house again.
Right.
Okay, cool. So I want to sort of move to what I think is probably the most important things that you discuss is easy water and the movement of electrons on collagen. So, I've been through many different phases of my life. I've tried acupuncture. I've done different things. When people start to talk about meridians and this is where I lose it, is where the upper left canine is attached to the lower right foot. I have, like, I call bullshit at certain points in time, but rethinking about the body and how it's constructed, from the collagen of our fascia right down to our cytoskeleton, that is the framework inside every single cell that literally is like cables and pulley moving your mitochondria around to where you want them. I rethought the meridians, and I just, maybe if you give us your thoughts on acupuncture, acupressure, the meridians, and then maybe an understanding. You don't need to go into deep about the easy water. My listeners will understand, but you can give us like sort of a brief overview. And just sort of, it's interesting as well because you are a massage therapist. So there's a lot of stuff that you get to combine that the average person is going to be thinking about. So maybe give us your thoughts on the meridians without me wanting to roll my eyes and.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. Because I even rolled my eyes on meridians, even in massage therapy school, and we did a ton of I didn't do acupuncture, I did acupressure, right, along the meridian, and along the meridians, and I didn't really put a ton of thought into it as I was learning it, but the more I kind of have, like you said, combined all of these things, it was just like, oh gosh, ancient wisdom meets modern science, and so let's just talk. If your listeners know easy water, then what we can then talk about, right, is this connective tissue network that goes everywhere. It penetrates into every cell, touches every part of the DNA. So there has to be, because we're these complex beings, like every cell, 100,000 tasks happening every second, something has to be energetically flowing all everywhere to coordinate that. It can't be that random collision biochemistry that you and I learned, right? And it just can't be. And so it became more and more obvious that there is an energetic pathway. There is this interconnected energetic flow that needs to happen. And the research that really highlighted to me what I believe to kind of prove the meridians as part of the connective tissue was a research article written by Mei-Wan Ho, where she basically said the meridians is the connective tissue and it can superconduct protons. So let's go there if you're okay with it.
I'm absolutely great with it. But let's so easy water is going to create an exclusion zone where it's going to be more negative, closer to your biologic surfaces, and the protons are going to get pushed out. So we maybe can start from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with this idea that the connective tissue that we're ultimately talking about is collagen, and collagen is it in itself is like a helical shape. And it's
helix, right?
It's like, yeah, and then it's three helices wrapped around each other. So it's like a helice and then three. And when you actually take a cross section of the triple helix of collagen, they've highlighted several different places where they've created that where the collagen creates something called a water nanotube. It's insane. And so what would be the purpose of a water nanotube? Well, like you said, the water nanotube forms on, you have the collagen, right? A protein. It forms this negatively charged exclusion zone. It kicks out the proton, right? So you get this positively charged proton zone. And what they're realizing is these protons are being superconducted through these water nanotubes instantaneously. It's proton jump conduction, superconduction. We can talk the physics of that. But a proton is a moving positive charge. Anything that is charged and moves creates an electric field, a magnetic field, and also it actually also creates infrared. It creates light. So it's believed that it's these water nanotubes inside of the connective tissue that is really the basis for the meridian system. So it is interconnected to the fascia. It has to do with the movement of protons through these water nanotubes. And I think there's something to it, right? There has to be an instantaneous communication system, and that sounds like a perfect one for me.
Right. So now the protons are flowing. I've heard proton river before. Now the electrons, they're also flowing. So
Yes,
are they
sir.
going different directions? What's happening here? Where are I mean, my assumption is that all of the negative charge that's closer to the biologic surfaces are flowing in one direction, and then the outer area is going to be the protons, because that's what easy water is doing. It's separating the protons and electrons.
And
So,
I would actually say that the electrons can conduct through it in any direction, actually, because it's a lattice, right? You have, instead of a free moving proton wire, that exclusion zone water is a crystalline lattice. So it is negatively charged because of its configuration. And then the only thing that we know that fits into an exclusion zone area is photons or electrons. So that's where then, if we conduct electrons into our body, let's say via the earth, or let's say via ultraviolet sunlight can also create free electrons through that area. Yes, then they can flow, and they can flow in any direction at that point.
would you consider a photon a flying electron?
Oh, interesting. I mean, ultimately, I consider everything photons. So yes, I would say yes.
I was worried you're going to bring up Schrodinger's cat, because I hate that whole discussion. Okay, cool. It was just because people if photons will only interact with electrons, that's from the photoelectric effect, and that's one of the laws of nature. So okay, very interesting. All right, so I want to get to the mitochondria next. And so basically the mitochondria is connected to everything. And then these electrons are being brought into the electron transport chain. I don't want to bore people with that. I call the electron transport chain a game of hot potato with electrons. But do you think that protons are being fed into the mitochondria for basically the production of ATP through ATP synthase? I'm not sure if you checked out my record label, Deuterium Records, but the logo you'll see spinning, that's a cross section of ATP synthase and the
Cool.
6 chambers. What do you think about that? Do you think that we're getting a really great supply of extra protons to be able to utilize?
I mean, I do think we are. I don't think it's happening the way you and I we're taught. I don't think that we're only getting electrons via the breakdown of something like glucose, right? And same thing with protons. I don't think the only protons that we're getting are being pumped, right, against a gradient. I think when we look at the body as these highways of proton flow and highways of electron flow, the body can then just send those substances, those subatomic particles, where they're needed. So I think part of the reason why exclusion zone water is so important is because it gives us those highways. It gives us more of those protons that we can allow, that can then flow in. And frankly, I think it's an area where we sequester deuterium, right? Because deuterium bonds oxygen with like a 9.6 times higher affinity, right? So it's more likely to get sequestered in the exclusion zone. We'll kick out the exact proton that we need, and then we can funnel it to where it needs to go so that we can generate ATP.
Okay, and so that you just, thank you. I didn't have to put it. So there's my deuterium hat.
Ah, awesome.
And right. And so I've represented deuterium as a DJ because I'm, basically I'm about the music. So that's my biggest question is, do you think that easy water filters out deuterium?
It's a great question. I mean, there's arguments in two ways, right? And Dr. Pollack, and we've had some communications about this. I've talked with a couple other researchers, and Dr.
I interviewed him a couple of years ago, and he didn't have anything to say about deuterium.
Not
Nothing.
yet.
But this is maybe 5 years ago.
Right. And I think he's been asked the question enough. And I think that he's kind of in one camp because he says deuterium won't fit in the liquid crystalline lattice. That doesn't make sense to me. I think it's about bonding affinity. Because it's a liquid crystal, there is a little bit of movement available, right? So I don't think we're not dealing with a purely crystalline substance. I'm more of the Stephanie Seneff camp. I think it has to do with the bonding affinity and a way for the body, because the body needs these deuterium depleted protons, right? They need this deuterium depleted hydrogen in so many ways, from the lysosomes to the mitochondria. And I think that sequestering deuterium in the exclusion zone is one way, a main way that we're able to kind of filter out the deuterium from those protons.
Okay, I like that. It leads us to a couple other things. It leads us to molecular hydrogen and hydrogenases, and the idea that I want to get into what you think about how to live a deuterium depleted lifestyle, or how these are. I was on a podcast with Tracy Deuce called Hydration.
Oh, I'm going to be on her podcast next week. That'll be cool.
Fantastic. Yeah. She's amazing. I actually did it in person with her, and she made me this concoction. And like, it was my best interview. I don't know what she put in there, a bunch of mushrooms and different things, but she's great. So the idea that when I don't speak to Laszlo Boros anymore, and there's a lot of history with this whole thing, and there's so many questions I always want to ask him. But basically, more time in the sun means more deuterium depletion. And I want to kind of talk about the ways that would happen. So one way would be, well, if you're in the sun, you're increasing your easy water extensively. So number one, if easy water filters deuterium, then you're definitely going to be getting rid of more of it. Okay. What other things about being in the sun do you think would help you to deplete deuterium? One of the other things that I brought into this was infrared radiation makes the matrix water less viscous, so you can generate more energy. So being in the sun. So I don't know. This is kind of more of like, what do you think question. Do you drink molecular hydrogen? Do you do hydrogen tablets? I used to do a routine because I'm very specific with what I eat, what I don't eat. I used to take deuterium depleted water and put in 2 hydrogen tablets and drink that. Stephanie Seneff and I had a conversation about. She said she found a study, I couldn't find it, that said that the gas, the molecular hydrogen gas was deuterium depleted. It was something as low as 20 parts per million. So what are your comments on that type of stuff? And I do have, this is my product. It's a pull patch hat. So now I'm going to just switch it to my molecular hydrogen.
Yeah. I love molecular hydrogen. I actually asked Tyler LeBaron that same thing. I don't know if you know Tyler, right? Yeah, if you know molecular hydrogen, everyone knows Tyler.
I remember I interviewed Stephanie Seneff and these guys 5-7. I've been on this trail a long time, but go ahead.
Yeah, you're way ahead of me in terms of all that.
Wow.
So
hold on. You help me understand a lot of this, because some of it, it doesn't make sense, but through your Instagram and through your podcast that I heard, you helped me to understand this just a little bit better. So go on.
Oh, thank you. So I asked the same thing, and Tyler said basically exactly what Stephanie said, and it's that there is no potential for, because in its gaseous state, for there to be a deuterium, because it's heavy, right? I mean, you think of almost like it weighs it down, if you will. So he said that there is really no concern with deuterium being generated through molecular hydrogen tablets. And so, I do molecular hydrogen, right? The research there is astronomical in terms of how it behaves. What I love about it is it's a selective antioxidant, because we get this idea that we hear that the body creates oxidative stress, and that's really bad, right? That's inflammation. It's really bad, and we need to quench it all. But when you look at the studies that they've done to quench excessive, or to quench this oxidative stress, they've done it in smokers, and they gave them a bunch of antioxidants, and the group that received the antioxidants was doing worse than the group that wasn't receiving the antioxidants. So you have to recognize that the mitochondria are making these oxidative stress molecules as a signal. And when we suppress the signal, we lose communication. We don't get the gene expression we need. We don't get the protein function that we need. And so when I found out that molecular hydrogen was a selective antioxidant, that told me that it optimizes that signaling, right? Like, it lets the signal go through, but if we start to get excessive amounts, it'll suppress that. And so I really appreciate molecular hydrogen for that role. I mean, among so many others. I don't know how much you've done I'm drawing a blank on the researcher's name. Arturo Solaris Herrera, right? Arturo Solaris Herrera, Dr. Herrera. He's been researching melanin, and how melanin which we have everywhere in our bodies, not just skin, right? Everywhere in our bodies, that we actually can create molecular hydrogen from sunlight reaction with melanin, right? And so we can actually dissociate the hydrogen. And so like we have so many mechanisms in the body where we're looking to get hydrogen because it's just another subatomic particle that we need and we're lacking. And so like I talked about the earth as a source of electrons, we got a lot of other ways that we can, you get hydrogen and use hydrogen for a lot of different purposes as well.
All right, I like that. A lot of the talk about we haven't talked about food or diet or any of that stuff, but a lot of talk about whether it's blue zones or eating vegetables. One of the comments I heard was that people who are eating those undigestible fibers, they're producing molecular hydrogen, so that's what increases the longevity. So that it's not necessarily eating a vegan diet; it is that you're actually making more molecular hydrogen, which is basically helping, this is part of how our bodies function. And maybe a lack of these vegetables is creating a lack of hydrogen gas. Now, I'm more in the carnivore camp than anything personally. I just like to think about what would you find in a grocery store 20,000 years ago? That's what you should eat. Mm-hmm. No secret there. There is no pizza. And the other thing is that I've had this discussion about with vegans and vegetarians. They get so mad. And I say, I'm going to tell you that no hunter-gatherer in the history of this planet ever said, hey, honey, I'm going out. I got a basket. I'm going to get some kale, some butter lettuce, and some radishes. Get the cutting board and the knives ready. We're going to have one hell of a salad tonight. That never happened. All right.
Correct.
So, what do you follow? Which camp are you on? What do you feed your kids? What do you think about hot dogs? And hot dogs are now my favorite food because now they make organic, grass-fed, grass-finished, no nitrate, no preservative hot dogs. I mean, who doesn't love hot dogs? But I thought they were bad for us. And then you think about how they're made. Well, they suction the bones with a high-power suction. Isn't that the most collagen-rich tissue? Right? Hot dogs probably a superfood. So what do you eat in your home? How do you pace your day? What do you feed your kids? That's a lot to throw in there.
It's a lot, right? So me personally, I'm seasonal keto carnivore, meaning that if it's a fruit or a vegetable that grows in my location, I get it from the farmer's market, organic, right? Because glyphosate's a whole different story.
I'll stop you there. Why seasonally?
Well, because the plants can grow only when the light's available, right? That's the thing. And so if I'm eating plants, if I'm eating a pineapple in the middle of December, it creates a mismatch. It's a mismatch. I'm actually, like you said, electrons are light. Electrons contain light. So as that electron gets burned or jumps through my mitochondria, it's releasing the light that's stored in it. If I'm releasing tropical light in the middle of winter, it's changing electron flow through my mitochondria. So I typically avoid the bananas in December.
But I feel like I think more of deuterium, because I think more that the deuterium is mastering your environment from the sunlight and the food. So if you're eating a pineapple in Alaska, that's loaded in deuterium. It's okay if you eat it in Hawaii without your clothes on. That's where you should eat pineapple. Okay, sorry, go on.
I absolutely agree with that. That's the second aspect of that. 100% would be the deuterium content, right? And so that's why I typically am I'm a meat, fish-based eater in the middle of winter. And actually probably more like 8 months out of the year where I live. And so, and then, but that being said, I'm not a purist either. When we go out to eat as a family, I avoid as much of the garbage as possible, but I try to eat as best as I can at a restaurant, but that's not going to be perfect, right? I don't subscribe to perfection when it comes to that. I also think that that's a healthy thing to, show my children that yes, we try the best we can, but there are times when we just enjoy ourselves in a different way. And so my kids can handle more deuterium. They're still growing, right? And so that's one of the things about deuterium is that it changes mitochondrial function to potentially as a growth signal, and children are still growing. So my kids, kids are smart. When you let them live with nature, when you have them outside more, when you if they watch a screen, it's red, right? If you shift how they behave, they naturally know what's best for them. So if my daughter wants to eat some frozen strawberries in the middle of winter, I'm not going to stop that, right, at all. They also eat a lot more things like rice and beans even, right? And they're fine. They're growing kids, they're fine. I try to give them real food as much as possible. The one real food that I try to get them as much as possible is DHA, because it coats their neurons, it myelinates their brain, it gives them electrons. So that's one thing I always make sure that I give them.
What are the foods you give them that they'll eat that have DHA?
Well, when they're really little, I start them on sardines. I start them on sardines, and they just, and so now it's like eating sardines is not a weird thing to them, right? Sardines, but then also, salmon, occasional tuna, not a big deal. Like and there's always for those parents out there, there's always an age range from about 4 until 7 or 8, where they think everything you ever fed them was absolutely disgusting, and they'll never touch it again. But my oldest son, he has cycled right back to eating all that stuff and then more, right? And so just be aware if you're a parent of young kids. So that's what we eat. I eat what grows here. Like you said, what could I have gone out and hunted or gathered? And I want the most nutrient dense, right? I want the most nutrient dense. So that's either going to be me catching a salmon or a trout, right? Or hunting a deer, right? We do a lot of venison here in the fall and winter. So that's what it's going to be. That's what we eat.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, we're coming to the end of our hour. There's a million things we didn't get to talk about, like glyphosate, and it doesn't really matter, just because I wanted to focus on the things I think that we covered. Before we let you go, 2 things. Number 1, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you think is really important about your work that you want to share with the audience? Number 1. Number 2 is, how can people find you and work with you?
Oh gosh, I feel like we need to chat again. So let's say we talked about a bunch of great stuff. I'd love to do a part 2 though, because I feel like there's a lot more, we covered so much, but I feel like there's so much more that you and I could dive into, especially with an audience that has a little bit more of a foundation on this stuff. So I'd love to do this again at some point. Even kind of get to the weird esoteric aspect of us being liquid crystalline and what that means from a frequency perspective, from a non-native EMF perspective.
I'm into all that. Remember, I'm working with music, and I don't know if you've heard any of my music yet, but talk about frequency. So
I heard a couple of enzyme songs that I loved.
Just wait. So okay. I pitched a full-length feature film called Enzymes, Mother Nature's Nanobots.
Oh, that's super awesome. That's super cool. I absolutely love it. Cool. So if obviously the way we connected, I think it's a great way to kind of get access to my work, and that's on Instagram, Carrie B Wellness. I post every day about this stuff. It is deeper on the science, but I try. Unlike Jack Cruz, who kind of really keeps it here, I try to take it here, honor the science. Like, I don't try to dumb it down, but I try to make it accessible, because I think that's how people start to apply this stuff, when they can truly understand that going outside for 2 minutes matters. Touching the bare earth for 2 minutes, 2 seconds matters. So Instagram, Carrie B Wellness. And then there you'll find a bunch of links in my link tree, right? I teach certification course in this for medical professionals. I have just various webinars. If you're kind of tipping your toes into this, I've got a bunch of webinars and workshops and online courses that I've taught. And so that's a great way to kind of get into this stuff. And I do one-on-one work, but I really these days only work with people one-on-one once they've taken a couple of key webinars and things, so that I don't have to, we can work together appropriately. I don't have to waste my time saying, see the sunrise, touch the earth, block blue light, all those things I think are just foundational.
Right. Fantastic. Okay. Well, I agree. I feel like this was an overview. There's a lot of topics I wanted to cover. And again, I wanted to thank you, just because I don't know who's out there. There's not a lot. And I love what you're doing. And I look forward to getting deeper into some of these subjects. I'm a huge science geek, and my whole goal is, when you see my cartoons and my music, is that I want people to be singing these different songs. I don't know if you read the words on my Deuterium Records label's website, but read those songs. And I think kids are going to be singing this. Kids and adults will be singing the songs and the words before they really understand the profound nature of what you are talking about and what I want them to know. So
it's a beautiful thing, right? Because we all remember those songs that we learned in grade school about conjunctions and all that stuff.
Schoolhouse Rock.
Right? So yeah, let's make this quantum house rock or something, right? Because it's perfect. I
Excellent,
love it.
excellent.
I absolutely
Great
love it. So
idea.
yeah, I'd love to chat again, Joel.
Fantastic.
Thanks for this opportunity.
Okay, thank you so much. Great.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.